Have you ever wondered why it seems like God is silent just when you need him most? When your soul cries out for an answer, when your heart searches for direction and all it finds is silence. A silence that disturbs, that questions, that makes you wonder if your prayers are reaching heaven. Maybe you're experiencing this right now, praying, fasting, seeking, but feeling as if your words are lost in the void. It's a feeling that consumes you, isn't it? That feeling of talking to yourself, that when God is silent, our faith begins to waver. But what if I told you that this silence from God isn't abandonment? What if behind this apparent absence lies a greater purpose than you imagine? Over the next few minutes, let's discover together the mystery behind the moments when God seems distant. Today, you will discover that divine silence can be the most profound form of communication there is. Prepare your heart, because what you're about to learn can completely transform your perspective on the most difficult moments of your walk with God. Sometimes what we consider silence is actually God whispering truths that our souls are not yet ready to hear aloud. This feeling is real, it's profound, and you're not alone. When it seems like God isn't listening, our hearts are filled with questions that come like waves. Have I sinned? Do I not have enough faith? Has God forgotten me? This is exactly what Joseph felt at the bottom of a dark cistern, abandoned by his own brothers. Just imagine a 17-year-old boy with God-given dreams suddenly finds himself betrayed, sold into slavery, and taken to Egypt. Genesis 37 tells us that Joseph was thrown into an empty cistern by the brothers who were supposed to protect him. Later, even though he was faithful in everything, Joseph was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison. There, he interpreted dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, asking only that they remember him when they left. But Genesis 40:23 clearly states, "But the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." For 2 full years, Joseph remained forgotten in prison. 2 years of total silence. Can you imagine the pain? The feeling that your prayers were rising to heaven and finding no answer? When God doesn't answer, our minds create 1,000 explanations, but rarely the true one. What if what you call abandonment is actually the time God is using to prepare his greatest miracle? This question echoes in the heart of every Christian who has ever walked through the valley of the shadow of death. Why is God silent? Is he testing me? Don't I deserve an answer? Or is there something much bigger going on behind the scenes of eternity? Biblical truth shows us that God never acts without purpose. When he allows silence, there is a divine reason behind it. Sometimes it's to strengthen our faith, as with Job. Other times, it's to prepare us for something greater, as with Joseph. And there are times when it's to teach us to depend completely on him. Think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Luke 22:44 tells us that he prayed so intensely that his sweat became like drops of blood. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." And what was the Father's audible response at that moment? Silence. But this silence was not rejection. It was confirmation that the plan of humanity's salvation depended precisely on that cross. God's silence isn't an absence of love, it's a demonstration of trust. He trusts you enough to let you grow in faith even when you can't see the way. Like a father who lets go of his child's hand so he can learn to walk alone. But if God trusts us so much, why then do our hearts despair when he seems distant? The answer lies in time. With the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. 2 Peter 3:8. These words reveal something revolutionary about the divine nature. God does not live by the pressure of our clock. While we count minutes of anguish, he coordinates centuries of purpose. When you cry out for an answer today and don't receive it, remember, you are operating in earthly time, but God operates in eternal time. Waiting on God's timing isn't passivity, it's wisdom. It's understanding that the creator of the universe sees the big picture you can't yet see. If this reflection touches your heart, please like it and subscribe to the channel. I want to continue sharing these truths that can transform your spiritual life. Abraham waited 25 years for the promise of a son. Genesis tells us he was 75 when God made the promise, and Isaac was born when he was 100. 25 years of silence about the most important promise of his life. But when Isaac was born, he wasn't just a baby. He was the beginning of a nation that would change the course of history. God's purpose in difficult times often only reveals itself when we look back. In that moment of waiting, it seems like nothing makes sense. But when revelation arrives, we realize that each day of silence was necessary for the miracle to have the right impact on our lives and the lives of others. But there is an even deeper truth about this silence, a truth that can transform your pain into purpose. True faith isn't born in the light. It grows stronger in the darkness. It's when all seems lost, when we can't see the path ahead, that learning to trust in God becomes not only necessary, but transformative. David knew this well. Pursued by King Saul, hiding in caves, fleeing like a criminal even though he was innocent, he wrote in Psalm 23:4, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Note that he didn't say, "if I walk through the valley," but even if, acknowledging that darkness is part of the journey. Spiritual darkness is where our dependence on God ceases to be theoretical and becomes essential. It's where we stop trying to control and begin to surrender. It's where our faith ceases to be based on feelings and is grounded in the Word of God. When you can't sense God's presence, it doesn't mean He's moved away. It means He's teaching you to walk by faith, not by sight. He's preparing you for an intimacy with Him that doesn't depend on sensations, but on conviction based on His Word. Strengthening your faith in the face of hardship is like exercising a muscle. It only grows through resistance. And this resistance you're facing now may be exactly the strength your soul needs to become stronger than ever. Those who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. Isaiah 40:31. But how exactly do we hear His voice in the midst of silence? Here's the secret that can revolutionize your spiritual life. God never stops speaking. The problem isn't His voice. It's our ability to hear spiritually. How can we hear God's voice when everything seems silent? By tuning into the right frequency. Elijah learned this in the most dramatic way possible. 1 Kings 19 tells us that after a crushing victory against the prophets of Baal, he fled in fear of Jezebel and hid in a cave. God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." A great wind came, tearing the mountains apart, then an earthquake, then a fire. But God was not in any of them. He was in the still, small voice. God speaks through His Word. When you open the Bible seeking guidance and a verse jumps out at you as if written especially for you, that is the voice of God. He speaks through circumstances, that door that opens when all others close, that person who appears in your life at just the right moment. He speaks through the inner peace that passes all understanding. As Paul wrote in Philippians 4:7, when you make a decision aligned with His will, He speaks through dreams, through other people, through that spiritual conviction you feel deep in your heart when you are connected to Him. To feel God's presence, sometimes we need to stop looking for the extraordinary and start noticing the subtle. He is in the gentle breeze that touches your face during prayer, in the comfort that fills your heart when reading a psalm, in the inexplicable strength you find to face another day. But what if you already know how to listen, but it still feels like He's not saying anything? There's something specific you can do. If you're experiencing this silence right now, don't just sit there waiting. There's a biblical protocol for times when God seems distant, and following these steps can transform your experience of waiting into growth. First, keep praying, even without answers. Jesus taught in Luke 18 about the widow who persisted with the judge until she received justice. Her persistence didn't bother God, it pleased Him. Second, immerse yourself in the Word like never before. If God isn't speaking audibly, he will certainly speak through Scripture. Third, serve others. Some of God's greatest revelations come when we are busy caring for others. Joseph received his deliverance by interpreting dreams in prison. David was anointed king while tending his father's sheep. Fourth, worship even in pain. Acts 16:25 tells us that Paul and Silas were singing in prison at midnight, and God sent an earthquake to free them. The lessons of God's silence are profound. He teaches us patience, develops our faith, and reveals our true motivation to serve him. Sometimes we discover that we were seeking God's blessings more than God himself. Your worship in adversity moves God's heart powerfully. When you choose to trust even when you don't understand, when you praise even when you suffer, you are declaring that your faith doesn't depend on circumstances. And in the midst of this journey of silence and waiting, there is something that can sustain your heart when everything else seems to fall apart. Your pain is real. Your anguish is valid. God doesn't minimize your suffering or ask you to pretend everything is fine, but he offers something that can coexist with your pain. Hope in God in the pain, an anchor that holds your soul steady when everything is stormy. Biblical hope isn't blind optimism. It's the certainty that God is in control even when you're not. It's knowing that all things work together for good to those who love God. Romans 8:28. Even when we can't see that good anywhere. Job lost everything, children, possessions, health. His wife told him to curse God and die. But in the midst of the deepest pain a human being can experience, he declared in Job 19:25, "I know that my Redeemer lives." This is faith in difficult times, not denying reality, but trusting in sovereignty. Pain has a purpose in God's hands. It brings us closer to him when all else fails. It shatters our self-sufficiency and leads us to a place of total dependence. It reveals the superficiality of some friendships and the depth of others. It teaches compassion we could learn no other way. When you don't understand what God is doing, hold on to what you know about who he is. A loving, faithful, just Father, and mighty to save. His identity doesn't change with your circumstances. He remains the same God who parted the sea, who raised Jesus, who can do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine. But there is a revelation about God's silence that can change everything, a hidden message that few discover. Prepare your heart to receive one of the most profound truths of the Christian life. God's silence is not an absence of communication. It is the most intimate way he has found to speak to you. This is God's message to you, hidden in the apparent emptiness. When God is silent verbally, he is speaking directly to your soul through experience. Every tear shed in prayer, every night spent seeking answers, every moment of brokenness, all of this is God molding his character in you in a way words never could. Silence is the environment where true intimacy is born. Think about the most profound moments with the people you love. They aren't always filled with words. Sometimes it's shared silence that communicates more love than 1,000 speeches. With God, it's no different. Right now, while you feel distant, God is closer than ever. He is watching every movement of your heart, recording every sigh of faith, honoring every act of trust, even without visible evidence. God's silence is his way of saying, I trust you so much that I don't need to explain every step to you. I trust that you love me not just for my blessings, but for who I am. I trust that your faith is genuine enough to withstand the absence of supernatural signs. And when you understand this truth, something powerful happens in your soul. God's silence isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of your deepest transformation. When you stop fighting the silence and begin to inhabit it, you discover that within it resides a version of yourself that could only be born in the stillness of waiting. People who experience divine silence and remain faithful emerge different, more compassionate because they have known the pain of apparent absence. Wiser because they have learned to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. stronger because their faith has been tested in the fire and approved as pure gold, according to 1 Peter 1:7. God's purpose in difficult times always points to a greater truth. He's not just solving your problems, He's forming your character. He's not just changing your circumstances, He's changing you. And this inner transformation is the greatest miracle you can experience. Joseph didn't know that years of silence were preparing him to save a nation from famine. David didn't imagine that the caves where he hid would become the birthplace of the most beautiful psalms ever written. Paul didn't understand that prison would be the place where he would write letters that would transform the world. Your silence also has an eternal purpose. Strengthening your faith in hardship isn't just about surviving the present moment. It's about becoming the person God intended you to be from before the foundation of the world. So when the silence comes again, and it will, because it is part of the journey, remember these words from Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." Silence is not abandonment. It is an invitation to deeper intimacy. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who's also experiencing a moment of silence. Leave a comment sharing how God has spoken to you through stillness, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of faith together. May the God of the impossible transform your time of waiting into a time of growth, and may you discover that His silences are as sacred as His words.